I guess we still need to do our regular intro, yes?
Hi, everybody. I'm Matt.
And I'm Steve.
And this is Marvel Reread Club. Well, guys, welcome back. It's been a long break. We recorded the first half of April 1967 with special guest Heidi McDonald over a month ago, and we let her choose which issue she wanted to do. So this month we're going to do whichever one's left over. But we had a very long break. We had a very long break because we had a lot of depression and anger, I guess would be the words.
Let me just throw in here, just let me interrupt before we get too much further, that, generally, we have generally tried to keep this to be an apolitical podcast, if for many different reasons. One of which is people just need to go to a place where they don't have to deal with modern politics for a while. You can go and detox from all of that stuff. And we like this to be one of those places. We will be talking about modern politics for the next couple or 3 minutes here. So if you're like, nope, I want to jump forward to the detox here and not get bogged down in this, please feel free to do that. Okay, Matt, proceed.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree because, I have, after the election, I had been listening to a lot of, MSNBC podcasts, which had been giving me a very false notion of what was going to happen in the election. And after the election, I'm like, oh my God, I need to, I was in a bad place. At one point, I woke up in such paroxysms of rage. I had to be taken to the hospital and sedated. I was in a really bad place. And the only thing I could do, obviously I couldn't listen to any of my old political podcasts anymore. The only thing I could do was listen to this podcast, which I gave another complete listen to. I've almost given a complete listen to it. I'm on episode 90 or so. So that's 90 hours of this podcast I've listened to since the election, which gives you a sense of how many dishes my family makes me do. I mean, they make me do a lot of dishes.
Well, in fairness, that was Thanksgiving weekend and you had the entire family there. So, yeah.
Yes. So anyway, and I love that my podcast is something I can listen to and not have to think about politics. So we're going to keep doing that. But we're also not going to lie. We're not going to lie and claim that there's some other reason we were off the air for the last month. We're not going to lie and claim that, I'm just not going to be as much of a happy-go-lucky guy, at least for this episode and maybe the next couple episodes, because I am consumed by depression and rage. But I have managed to continue hosting Bar Trivia, and I've been making sure everybody has a good time in Bar Trivia. And I'm now ready to resume this podcast, and I'm going to try to make sure everyone has a good time when I host this podcast. So that's what I wanted to say. I don't want to lie. I want to be honest about what's going on, but I think we can do it. I think we can hopefully have a good time today discussing these books, this odd conglomeration of books that was left over from Heidi's picks. What do you say, Steve?
Yeah, I'm in a very similar boat along with Matt. I definitely very strongly want this to remain as much as we can manage an apolitical podcast, given the fact that part of the whole thing that makes the Marvel Universe interesting is how it often would intersect with political and social issues. But, for the most part, leaving it out of modern politics. Now, in the when we talk about the issues of the next month of May, that's going to be pretty much impossible when we get to Tales to Astonish. But we will deal with that when we come to it. I volunteered dozens and dozens of hours for this not to happen, and it did. And I am also have been in a pretty bad place, but hopefully we can keep this stuff to a minimum. I will try to give content warning. Sounds like a bit of a strong statement, but I will try to give people a heads up if and when we do need to mention anything about modern politics. Once again, in case you're coming here for your mental health, and that would not be good for your mental health. But right now, Let's go ahead and just get back into talking about some funny books. Okay, so Yeah, well, when we had Heidi on, she was saying, what was that? I think it was about X-Men, was talking about how it couldn't get much worse than that. Like, let's start there because it can only go up. Well, the only reason it could only go up is because she did not include Daredevil in the books that we were reading. This one makes that issue of X-Men look like Shakespeare.
I thought it was really funny when I was going through and going, okay, what books did Heidi not choose? She didn't choose any of the Kirby. Like, don't people love Kirby? Like, why would anybody not choose any Kirby? So anyway, that's good. We've got a Kirby-rific day today. But first, let's do colon on Here Comes Daredevil.
Well, unfortunately, everything with Kirby is awesome, and everything without Kirby in this group of books is not, even though the art might be good. A very busy cover here for Daredevil number 27, guest starring the one, the only, the inimitable Spider-Man, featuring the honest-to-gosh end of the Masked Marauder. Oh, God, I wish that were actually true. And how about our Titanic title? Mike Murdock Must Die. Once again. Oh, would but that were true. If only. Anyway, Daredevil is just out and about patrolling for Stiltman, I guess. Why he's worried about Stiltman, I still do not quite know. He ends up running across Spider-Man, taking care of just a couple of petty thieves. Horns in on it, and horns. Get it? Horns. And apparently, Spider-Man is really not happy with this whole situation.
I do like it when Colin will split action up with panel borders, continuous action up with panel borders to create more of a sense of velocity, which he does on page 2 with Daredevil swinging. I really like it.
So Daredevil is like, okay, well, I realize that you're grumpy with me, but hey, if you happen to see the Stiltman, leave him for me. Meanwhile, the Masked Marauder has nabbed Stiltman. So in the previous issue, Stiltman was trying to get Frogman to team up with him because together they would be unstoppable. And then at the end of that, instead, the Masked Marauder had nabbed Stiltman because together they would be unstoppable. None of this stuff makes any sense. So the Masked Marauder, his new big weapon is he's got a helicopter that has a destructive force field down at the skids. That's his whole thing. And then meanwhile, Stiltman is like, oh, but you don't understand how impressive my stilts are. And he goes and does this, and the Masked Marauder is like, it's almost unbelievable. Your stilts move faster than the eye can follow. It's like, oh man, the stakes are so low on these guys. It's just, anyway. So Stiltman comes up to the Nelson and Murdoch offices because Masked Marauder told him, hey, I know that these folks have some connection with Daredevil. I don't know what, but let's just kidnap all of them and get them, and we'll be able to get the info. So Stiltman comes up on his stilts, throws in some sleeping pellets, then somehow I guess he's climbed into the office, although we don't really see how that happens, and then he's coming back out to meet a helicopter, which is dropping a basket to put all the people on, but for some reason the basket also has a balloon on it, and
why?
They sort of reference
what purpose does the balloon? The balloon is not going to get filled with either hot air or some lighter than air gas. It's going to dangle beneath the helicopter. Why a balloon?
I have nothing. It makes no visual or storytelling sense in any way whatsoever.
No. I got to say, the railings on the bottom of the helicopter are really bent, and it looks like it would be like a rocking horse when it actually landed on the ground. And it really reminds me of the Grinch's sleigh.
Oh, yeah. So Matt Murdock comes to, and he's like, oh, I need to become Daredevil, but I can't become Daredevil as long as they're holding us captive until Daredevil comes to rescue us. So I'm going to go and just rat out the real Daredevil, my imaginary twin brother, Mike Murdock. Of course, Karen is like, oh, how could you, you coward?
How many times have we had this storyline?
How many times? So, well, and we're going to have basically the same storyline with Iron Man later in this episode. Yes. And, that one he's done at least 3 times in the past.
How many times has Thor thrown Don Blake under the bus, or Don Blake thrown Thor under the bus, and Jane been like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you would do that. Oh my God. They do it over and over again.
So anyway, we've just got some ridiculous visuals in this issue because, among other things, the Stiltman is so visually ridiculous. Page 10 with him dangling his stilt legs out the side of the helicopter. It's just like, yeah, you're not doing us any favors showing us that right there. That is not going to convince me of anything. Anyway, so what Stiltman had come down to the surface to do was to go find Mike Murdock, and so he's just like, okay, here I am in my Stiltman costume. I'm just going to go find a phone booth and look up the name Mike Murdock in the phone book. Now, kids, we have to explain to you that once upon a time, back in the day, not only were there payphones that were just phones in a kiosk out there in the middle of the city, all over the place, because nobody had cell phones because cell phones didn't exist, but also they had phone books. And phone books were this whole book where everybody who had a phone had their name and their phone number, and you could just look them up, believe it or not. Usually had their address too. Just absolutely unbelievable in today's day and age that that's the world we grew up in, honestly. So, but anyway, yeah, so lo and behold, he couldn't find a Mike Murdock in the phone book. Now, did he bother to look and see if there were any M. Murdocks or any Michael Murdocks? You're telling me in the entire city of New York, the entire city, the phone book would not have a single Michael or Mike or M. Murdock?
Nope. City of 8 million people.
Okay. Sure. Yes. So anyway, Stiltman goes and says, well, maybe I can just start robbing a jewelry store and that'll flush out Daredevil. Well, of course, it flushes out Spider-Man instead. Spider-Man's like, oh, here's that guy Daredevil told me not to fight because he wanted to fight him, but I'm going to fight him anyway because screw that guy. So Matt Murdock is then like, okay, well, I need to get him to throw me out the window so I can change back into Daredevil. But this force field is still going on out there. So first I need to headbutt the Masked Marauder so that he bumps into the force field controls, turns off the force field for the skids, then have him shoot me. That bullet will just go right between my wrists to be able to break the ropes that are tying me up and knock me out the side, at which point I will catch onto the skids with my feet, get out of my clothes, and swing right back in as Daredevil and give some sort of excuse about how Matt Murdock survived. The Masked Marauder is unmasked, although it's in a weird way. Daredevil refers to him as Farnham, who is their landlord, because this is Scooby-Doo, apparently. And only after that, he says, remove my helmet, girl. And so then, Karen removes his helmet. It's like, oh my god, it's our landlord. What? Which, indeed, what? So the Masked Marauder ends up falling out of the window of the helicopter and gets hoisted by his own petard. He gets disintegrated, it would seem, by the force field.
Yay!
Yeah, I know. So in the end, we see that Stiltman just decides to go ahead and escape from Spider-Man here. And in the end, he tries to shoot Daredevil, and it shorts out his stilts because he's in water, and then he just shrinks down to nothing and is supposedly floating in the water, even though his whole getup is solid metal.
Daredevil's not like, oh, either A, I'm letting him die, which would make sense, or B, I'm going to go rescue him, which would make sense if he's like all heroic and stuff. But he chooses C, I'm going to leave him floating in a huge metal costume in the river, seemingly unconscious, until the police get to him. It's like, well, if you're going to let him die, just admit you're going to let him die, because that plan makes no sense. Like the police,
No.
You mean the police in just their harbor patrol boats are going to see this unconscious metal man sinking in the middle of the river and make it there in time to save him? I don't know about that.
Yeah. Okay. Last thing I have to say about this issue. Well, I believe I've actually got to go back and check a couple of notes, but I will point out that in the letters page we have a letter from Tom Orzechowski,
future great X-Men letterer.
Yeah, there are certain letterers who end up just getting attached to certain writers or artists, where that writer or artist clearly is like, my work doesn't look like it should unless I have this letterer working for me. So for Walt Simonson, you've got John Workman. Walt Simonson work wouldn't look right if you had it lettered by anyone but John Workman. Howard Chaykin, Ken Bruzenak.
Mm-hmm.
And Chris Claremont, Tom Orzechowski. I mean, you have no argument to that, right?
Yeah, I certainly don't. Okay, yes, I had a bunch of notes on this issue. This is a truly terrible issue. Is this the first time we've seen Cohen draw Spider-Man?
I don't know.
I think it may be, and he's struggling a little bit. The mask looks a little pinched. It looks like there's no nose on the mask or something like that. So then, I gotta say, there is some truly awful art in this issue, especially one of the most atrocious pieces of art we have seen in the 110 episodes of this podcast, whatever episode we're up to. On page 6, the middle panel in the bottom of the page, where does that second leg attach? Where does the Stiltman's second leg attach to his body?
Oh, yeah.
We're looking down at the Stiltman, And there's his two legs are coming up from the ground, and then there's his body, and the two legs do not attach to his body at all. He would have to have the world's oddest hips in order for this to work. And Cohen knew this. Cohen is not, a terrible artist. He knew this didn't work, and yet he just didn't care. He just didn't care. Same thing happens basically on page 12, the second panel on page 12. Again, he would have to have the world's oddest hips for those two legs to line up. Once again, we're looking down at Stiltman. Just absolutely terrible. Absolutely terrible. Obviously, Cohen's good penciler, Giacoy is a good inker, but just nobody cared. Nobody cared about this particular issue.
I will not really argue with that assessment that nobody cared. And it's funny. I've thought more and more about what Rob Salkowitz said the second time we had him on about like, how is it that Stan Lee hasn't passed Daredevil off to Roy Thomas at this point? I mean, yes. He clearly doesn't care.
I think that Stan has some odd affection for this book, and I think he's putting, good artists on it, but I don't think Gene has any real affection for this book. I mean, there's some not terrible art in this issue, but he just, by the way, I always complain about his drawing of ladies' shoes, but on page 13, he actually does a shockingly good job with Karen's shoes. So he can do it if he really wants to.
I do not remember your complaints about ladies' shoes, but
he really draws some terrible. He does a terrible job at them usually, but and even in this issue, he does a terrible job in some spots. But anyway, that's my thoughts about this issue. Do you have anything else to add, or should we move on?
No, nothing worth saying. Let's move on.
Yeah. All right. Let's go ahead and move on to Fantastic Four number 61. In this, we're doing these completely out of order because Heidi went out of order. And now we're going out of order. So let's go and do Fantastic Four. In this epochal issue, EPOCHAL, in this epochal issue, the end of Mr. Fantastic, where stalks the Sandman. So Sandman very much started off as a Ditko villain. He even has Ditko hair, but eventually he has left Spider-Man. He has not fought Spider-Man in a long time, and he has been fighting the Fantastic Four instead for a long time, but he's still had his Ditko clothes on. Well, finally, Kirby is like, enough of that. Let's put some Kirby clothes on this guy. And he finally takes off his Ditko street clothes outfit, and now he's got on a wild Kirby-esque costume that includes special chemicals in it from the wizard to help him turn his sand into other things, so he's a more impressive villain. We begin with the Fantastic Four are in their headquarters when suddenly their own weapons begin running out of control and attacking them.
One issue that I have with this issue, on the cover, it shows the Sandman. The title is Where Stalks the Sandman? And then the big sort of mystery for the next several pages is, what is it that could be turning our own machines against us? And why is this room filling up with sand? And it's like, you kind of told us twice earlier on. Could have been better thought out.
Yeah, but so when I say the Fantastic Four, it's actually the Fantastic Three. It's Reed, Sue, and Ben, because Johnny, so last we saw, Johnny was still out searching for the Inhumans. Now we know that the Inhumans are free. They have destroyed the Great Barrier that was surrounding their city. So then we then get, before we get to Johnny, we get something that basically already happened last episode, but we get to see it in more detail while they were still in Latveria. They saw the Silver Surfer's board returning to the castle where the Silver Surfer was held captive. So we saw that already happen last issue, but this time we actually got to find out what happened inside the castle, although at this point the Fantastic Four are back in America, so the timing doesn't line up. But we have a very funny thing where, like, the guards, Doctor Doom's guards inside Doctor Doom's castle are trying to taunt Silver Surfer and go like, yes, you will never be able to go back out into outer space. Of course, he already couldn't go out into outer space because he had Galactus's whammy on him, but they are going like, we know you like to ride around in outer space. We're going to show you a picture of outer space. Now, it's unclear if this is supposed to be like a photograph or like a painting, if they hired some painter to do a resplendent painting of outer space that they could taunt Silver Surfer with.
They clearly hired Jack Kirby.
Yes, because it's got Kirby Crackle.
They went to the World Book Encyclopedia and opened the article on space.
They tore at the page on space. And then, anyway, so they're just taunting him with a photograph or a painting of space. See the reaches of outer space. See the unending vastness that you call home. And anyway, they're taunting him, but then whoops, his board comes in the door. He gets it, and then he seemingly destroys the whole castle with everyone in it. Certainly seems like he's killed hundreds of people here. Stanley is not adding anything, going like, it's a good thing everyone fled the castle in the last 2 seconds so that now I can destroy it, or anything like that. Anyway, that's sort of catching us up on what surely happened last issue before the Fantastic Four left Latveria. But anyway, now the Fantastic Four are once again home. They're still trying to figure out why things are turning against him, and then everything fills up with sand, and we find out it is Sandman in his new Kirby-friendly costume, which I like. I mean, when I was a kid, I was reading reprints of old Spider-Man and Fantastic Four comics and wondered why his costume was so different in the two, and I guess I preferred the Ditko clothes to the Kirby costume. Which do you prefer?
I very much prefer the Ditko stuff. This Kirby outfit never made any thematic or even visual sense to me. Honestly, it's I'm not a big fan of this one. So
Yeah.
it sounds like we have a bit of a disagreement on that. But yeah, I'm not a big fan of this look.
I like
And
them both.
among other things, it's like he's like, oh yeah, so I took the advice of the wizard and went ahead and took a refresher course on quote science and came up with this costume, which in my headcanon is just that he got the wizard to do it for him and is then taking some credit for it. That's
Yeah,
the
that makes
only
more
way
sense.
That makes any sense. And he does at one point say, "Oh yeah, the wizard did this thing for me," and I'm just like, "Yeah, dude, he did all of it for you. You did not. You specifically in your first appearance, it was made clear that you did not have a high school diploma.
Yes.
So." Just the wizard did it for you. Just let that be okay.
So there's a very clever bit on page 10 where Sue is invisible and is running away, but then he lays out a thin layer of sand on the ground and can see her footprints appearing in the sand as she runs, which is a clever way to defeat Sue and good way to see Sandman using his powers in a clever way. And then they keep fighting. Meanwhile, we stop in with the Inhumans, who are now free, but they're like, okay, well now Johnny's been looking for me for all this time. Now I'm looking for Johnny. I got to try to find him. I will have Lockjaw take me to him. Lockjaw can seemingly sense at least where Johnny has been. And we go to a football game between Metro University and Empire State University. So, of course, we have Peter Parker from Empire State University taking photos in the stands. Meanwhile, so seemingly Johnny and Wyatt have given up looking for Crystal and have just decided to go back to college. So remember, they used to be in college? They used to be college students a long time ago. That was how they met. They were college roommates. And then they decided they had a 2-week break where they decided to go to Wakanda. Well, that was back in issue 51. Now we're in issue 61. Presumably they've missed several years of college. I don't know how much they've missed of college, but they are now back. And Wyatt is not playing in the football game, right? He's on the sidelines wearing a windbreaker. But
so he's on the bench, and they're saying at one point in the story, who is that giant gentleman on the bench over there? We don't know who that player is, and why hasn't the coach put him in the game yet? And
so you may be thinking oh, right, I used to really, really care about the adventures of Coach Sam Thorpe and his attempt to find a good quarterback. And then you might think, no, I actually never cared about this. But then you might be thinking, oh, I guess I'm now supposed to go back to caring about it. Well, no, you're not, because this is the last we hear of it. They are going to now officially give up on trying to get us to care about the football team, the Metro football team. And in fact, I'm not sure we ever see Johnny in college again after this. They pretty much give up on, Johnny, this attempt at Johnny going to college. There will be other attempts in the future. But this whole storyline just fizzled out and got subsumed into the much better Crystal storyline. So then Crystal and Lockjaw appear on the football field and they find out that Johnny had been there. And so apparently Lockjaw was detecting residual Johnny energy. And they find out that he has now gone to help the Fantastic Four. Yes, to help the Fantastic Four.
I do not like that. Let me just go
okay. I'm going to let your mind go wherever your mind wants to go on that. And then, so then he finds out that Johnny has just left to go help his teammates fight Sandman. He goes, and unfortunately, I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead a bit here. Sandman ends up accidentally opening the portal to subspace. No, wait, we're not going to call subspace the negative zone instead of calling the Great Barrier around the Inhumans the negative zone. So then he goes ahead and opens the border to the negative zone, which it is now named and will be named forever. And somehow
which to be fair, that is a better and less generic name than subspace. Subspace is used in a lot of science fiction stuff. Negative zone isn't. And to have the whole thing, oh well, the Inhumans are no longer trapped behind this thing, so there's no more negative zone. I'm sure that Stan was just like, dude, that name was awesome. Why did I blow it on that? Let's just go ahead and use it here instead.
So, whoops, Reed gets sucked into the negative zone, something that will happen over and over again in Fantastic Four history. Reed has a bad habit of getting sucked into the negative zone, and this little exploding planet that is at the core of the negative zone that is always sucking things into it. And then Sandman is like, whoops, I didn't mean for that to happen. I'm noping out of here. And he jumps out the window and leaves. And then the rest of the Fantastic Four see the video screen of Reed being sucked into the exploding planet at the heart of the negative zone. And they realize it's all over. He's gone. Those are the final words of the issue. He's gone. And says continued next issue. So I think this is an excellent issue. We sort of remember there were these issues from 44 to 60, which were just this on fire epic of Lee Kirby Sinnott goodness on Fantastic Four, and that it ends with issue 60. Well, nobody told them that, because this is still going strong with issue 61. We've got Sandman's back. We've got the negative zone really becoming what it will be from this point on. We've finally about to bring Crystal and Johnny together. This doesn't feel like the good times are over at all. This feels like a great issue. What do you think of it?
As we've discussed earlier, I have never read this era of Marvel Comics at all. So I'm actually coming into this stuff fresh. And yeah, as somebody just reading this for the first time, it's like, no, we are right at that same level. I am guessing that people looking back on it will see sort of the trends of the book and look back to this as sort of the break point where maybe things started to drift. But at the moment, in the moment, looking at this, I cannot see that at all. It really is just on fire.
Yes.
So my issues with this issue, I don't like his outfit too much. 2 examples of me really not liking his outfit. His mask is utterly ridiculous. It's like a domino mask that then has a strap that goes over the top of his head, but it also goes around his ears. Whenever you get a close-up and have to see how the mask interfaces with the ears, it just does not work at all. Oh, and when I pointed out this panel, page 11, panel 2, on the Facebook group, somebody pointed out that Sandman has Kirby teeth here in this case.
How many teeth does he have, actually? Come to think about it, let's start counting those teeth. I think we got a toothy guy here. He does have Kirby. He's got Kirby teeth, and he's got a lot of Kirby teeth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 11,
I don't
12,
know
13,
if he has
14.
too many teeth, but you're seeing too much of them.
18, 19,
yeah. Anyway,
20,
one way or the
21,
other.
22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. No, that's too many teeth.
Okay. Yeah, so then the other thing about this is Reed is like, no, Ben landed against the space-time generator lever. If he makes a move, it could destroy the city. Don't move a muscle. And then he goes back, goes to it later, and he's trying to do something with it. And Johnny's like, but you always warned us, told us never to open it, basically because it could destroy the entire city or more. And it's like, how many devices do you have in the Baxter building that, if anything accidentally happens to it, could destroy the entirety of New York City? Didn't we have some kind of incidents several months ago, like a couple of years ago, where there were some kind of actual city inspectors who were coming by for various sorts of things in the Baxter building? I think we need more of that.
Yeah, I agree. Yes.
Can't you get some facility out in a less populated area to run your space-time experiments? Does it have to be right in Midtown Manhattan?
One more note I had in this issue. I say, they're torturing him with pictures of space. Did they take the picture themselves and blow it up? Is this a blacklight poster they got at a head shop?
Well, once again, that could also be a Kirby poster. Didn't they have a lot of blacklight posters based on Kirby's art that were sold in head shops back in the late 60s?
Yeah, I think they went to the Latverian head shop. Yeah.
So which issue are we moving on to next? Yeah, why don't I do Avengers? I mean, since we're doing everything out of order, let's go really out of order.
Okay.
So I'm going to do Avengers. You can then go back and do Tales of Suspense, and then I'm going to come back and finish up with Thor. How about that?
Okay. That sounds good.
Okay. Okay. So this Avengers issue is also pretty darn awful. I don't know if it's quite Daredevil level. It is definitely in a competition with X-Men for the second worst issue this month, I believe. So, The Torment and the Triumph, featuring the Mad Thinkers Triumvirate of Terror. Vote the Marvel Ticket. Stan Lee editor, Roy Thomas writer, Don Heck artist, George Bell inker. Again, we've got Heck and Bell, your favorite combo. Artie Simek, letterer, Irv Forbush, dog catcher. A choice, not an echo. Because not brand Ech and
Was
Echo.
that like
I
a
don't know.
advertising slogan at the time? A choice, not an echo, or something like that? That sounds like that was, for Bic razors or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, it's one way or the other. It's pretty try hard. So,
Wait, no, it was Schick. I guess it's Bic pens, Schick razors. I don't know. I'm combining in my head the products of the past are all mixing together.
have you been shaving with a ballpoint pen?
Ha!
or have you been writing with a razor blade?
No, that's what Vince Colletta does. I used to accuse him of trying to ink with. I used to try accuse him of trying to ink with a blade, just gashing into the page.
Okay, I set you up for that one, didn't I? All right, so Hawkeye is devastated that they have learned that Black Widow has stolen government documents from a military facility and is on her way somewhere behind the bamboo curtain. And all of the Avengers seem like they're shocked that the until very recently Russian spy would be doing Russian spy stuff. We get a little bit of an aside showing us, the reader, in case we'd missed it earlier, that this is actually Nick Fury who has hired her, basically recruited her as a double agent, and she is doing her double agent shield stuff. Hercules, in the previous issue, came to live with the Avengers for a little while, but is not officially a member of the Avengers. The rest of the Avengers are out, so he's just trying to occupy himself in the gym. He then gets a delivery, which is apparently modern clothes, which we will see him in a bit, in a relatively fun sequence. I will say there are some fun moments in this issue, even though it's largely dumb and some of the art isn't that great. But there are some fun moments. As we will see in a little bit. So Hawkeye ends up going swinging around the city like Daredevil or Spider-Man or something like that, because, that sounds like Hawkeye. And he's going to visit some of his underworld haunts, maybe to see if he can find something out about what Natasha is up to. Don Heck refuses to draw the Thinker not in the Rodin Thinker pose. Like, that's just never happens in the entire issue that he ever takes his fist off of his lips.
Meanwhile, in the Daredevil we just read, Daredevil leapt over a presumably replica of Rodin's Thinker, so we're getting lots of Rodin's Thinker this month.
We are. Is there any replica of Rodin's Thinker in New York City anywhere?
I believe there is, yes.
Hawkeye hears some damsel in distress screaming from one of the seedy warehouses or whatever it is that he's walking by. And he's like, oh, well, nobody knew I was coming by here, so it couldn't be a trap. Of course, the Mad Thinker has everything calculated. So he comes in and ends up fighting Hammerhead. Now, Marvel goes on later to have a B or C list mafia villain, or sorry, not mafia, Magia villain called Hammerhead, whose powers are very similar to this, but is definitely a different character. This is a D-list supervillain who has a head that is shaped like a hammer head. Yes. It's like shaped like the flat part of the hammer. There's no claw part of it. It's just I've spent too much time on it already. So.
Yes. And he'll also, one of Hammerhead will be working with someone here called the Pile Driver, and there will also be a later Marvel C-list villain called the Pile Driver. So we're using up names that they decided later they could use to better effect.
Yes. However, I don't think they've ever reused the name Thunderboot, which is the third one in this triumvirate of terror. Anyway, so Hammerhead is able to defeat Hawkeye. The Mad Thinker keeps on going on about his whole clockwork plan, and this will happen at this time, this will happen at that time, and then, yes, Hawkeye was defeated at exactly the moment that I said he would be, and all the Avengers will be dead by like 10:13 p.m. or something like that. So then here's the funnest part of this issue is Hercules gets in his sleek black suit and goes out to presumably a tiki bar themed. It's like a cross between a tiki bar and the Playboy Club.
Yeah.
And all of the waitresses are like, "Oh boy, this is my best night ever. We get to wait on this guy." So they are all super excited, and Hercules is very excited to have them excited about all of this.
I'm not sure if you're a waitress at a tiki bar, if you're like, I'm a waitress at a tiki bar because I want to date the clientele, the guys who hang out in tiki bars, or I'm hoping to land one of them. I'm not sure that's your best bet.
Yes, I absolutely understand that. I think that the whole thought is this is literally a god who,
Yes.
walks into the bar, right? And they look at this, they're like,
Normally, I would never dare date any guy who goes to the tiki bar where I waitress, but I'm going to make a rare exception in this one case.
yes, for the son of Zeus. Okay, so the rest of the Avengers are at Avengers Mansion. They get a distress signal from Hawkeye, or they think from Hawkeye. Apparently, it's actually from the Mad Thinker, who has knocked Hawkeye out, saying there's a blue alert, a condition blue. And so that is apparently only 2 Avengers are to be sent. The rest are to remain behind as reinforcements. So, okay, Giant Man and Wasp head out on one sky cycle, and she insisted on taking one of them because that way she could be holding on to his waist. He's like, "Why did we do this? This is silly." She's like, "You're just not romantic." So they are attacked by a giant steam shovel, or I guess they call it a steam shovel still at this point. I think we now call it a backhoe, since we haven't used steam power for those things for, at least 75 years or something.
Always makes me think of the classic children's book, Mike Mulligan and his steam shovel, as it did indeed when I looked at this.
Yes, indeed. So after destroying this backhoe, Pile Driver shows up, and he's got these big metal fists. There's a fight. Eventually, he wins. We don't need to get into it too much. And we now see that Hercules has picked up a guitar, which I guess is close enough to a lute or whatever that he can figure out how to play it. And actually, that's right. I think we saw him learn to play a guitar in Thor earlier, didn't we? In his early Thor appearances? Like when he was on that train. Yeah. So anyway, he picks up guitar.
We've seen him do it. I can picture him doing it in the Avengers of the 80s comics too. Yeah, he'll occasionally play guitar.
So he is singing a ballad of his own heroism here, which has all of the waitresses just transfixed. And he says, "'Tis divine to bask once more in the adoration of mortals. How I wish the friends of Thor were here beside me." Eventually, Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, they don't get summoned to the place where the Thinker and the rest of them are. Instead, the Thinker and Thunderboot. God, I just my soul dies a little bit every time I even say the name Thunderboot. But somehow they end up appearing at Avengers Mansion and have a big fight. And somehow a doofus named Thunderboot is able to defeat both of Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. The Mad Thinker then has all of the captured Avengers all tied up, and then his henchmen say, "Well, Thinker, what's next on your timetable?" As if we couldn't guess. And Thinker says, "My computer has called for me to execute the Avengers now at 10:13 p.m. But I see no need for undue haste. I wish to savor this glorious moment of moments." I'm just like, oh, God, just... I'm Scott Evil in this point. It's like, "Look, I got a gun in my bedroom. We can do it right now together. It's like a father and son thing. Bam, bam. Come on."
And your whole deal is that you do things on a precise time schedule. That's your whole thing.
Right.
Like if any villain were to take the proper moment to kill the Avengers, it would be you.
Yes. But no, he decides not to, and then that's when Hercules walks in. He had no idea that Hercules was going to be here because this is a new development. And at one point he says, I finally took the X factor of humans into account, but I forgot about immortals." Like, Thor has been at the Avengers before. This is not... Anyway, but one way or the other, Hercules is then able to essentially rescue everybody. And the Mad Thinker is like, okay, well, this time I took into account the human element. And to do that, I got human henchmen rather than androids. How that deals with that, I don't exactly know. And so now I need to take immortals into account. So next time I'll win. Anyway, that's it. Hercules still hasn't officially joined the Avengers, but he seems to be lost in it, loose ends, because he's still banished from Olympus.
I gotta say, I kind of like this cover. I don't like the Avengers on the machinery in the background. I never like Hex machinery, but Hercules himself he's got good sinews. They look, I almost suspect that Hercules was done by Buscema, who is going to take over this book in 2 months. I don't think he is. I think it's Heck, but I think it's Heck doing Heck, and presumably Bell inking him, doing a pretty nice job on Hercules on the cover. To the extent where
look like Bell. That does not look like Bell's ink. Oh, well,
could be.
Maybe
I think
it
does.
Is.
Yeah,
look underneath Hammerhead's left leg, and that just sort of blobby line. No, that does look like Bell. It just looks like Bell really. Either Bell put. You know what? Eventually, John Romita would start touching up almost every cover at Marvel for many years. I almost suspect that Romita touched up Hercules in this.
I don't know. I was going to say page 19 is a true mess with, we've got 11 panels crammed onto one page with a tremendous amount going on. Often you get this sort of poor pacing in Marvel Comics where they have to suddenly start cramming stuff in very quickly at the end. But anyway, that was it for this issue. It's not a very good issue. Next issue is, I believe, Heck's final issue, and I'm so happy about that.
Yeah, and one of Heck's real weaknesses, especially on the Avengers, which I think, a team book is this particular set skill that not every artist has, because you're just so many characters that you need to be, following, threading through your visual storytelling. And it just does not seem to be Heck's strong point. And yeah, this is by not nearly the first time we have had one of these things where at the end he just runs out of space and is having to cram way too much in.
I gotta say, I just re-listened to 90 episodes of our podcast, and I the whole time I'm like going, it's a good thing I'm not playing a drinking game with certain things. It's a good thing I'm not taking a drinking game for every time I say goon, because I say the word goon a lot. But it's also a good time that I don't do a drinking game for every time you say, Heck's just not suited for a team book, which you say, I've listened to 90 episodes and you've said it in at least 20 of those 90 episodes. And here we go. Here I am drinking again. And I got to say, we've only got one more issue of this, Steve. So get it out of your system.
It remains true. That's it. We'll jump forward to Champions in the 70s, and when Heck will again be drawing a team book.
Well, I should say that Heck does come back to the Avengers off and on over the years. But next issue will be his last issue as regular artist.
That's right. Isn't he actually the artist who co-creates Madame McEvil, who goes on to become Moondragon, I think, in an issue of Avengers? Anyway. But yeah, it's with this whole thing of running out of room to tell the story. Roy Thomas actually references this on page 20, panel 4, where the caption says, "We're all out of room, faithful ones, so we can't show you the ensuing onslaught in rapturous detail, but perhaps a typical reaction below will suffice." And you just hear bam, thwoom, rack, and a couple out on the street is saying, "The Avengers Mansion. It sounds like somebody's tearing it down." And the woman says, "That's all we need, another parking lot." But yeah, Roy Thomas seems to be like, dude, there could have been a fantastic fight scene here. Like, what are you doing? Yeah, it's not great.
All right. Well, then let's go ahead and move on.
Yes, let's do it.
I will go ahead and handle now Tales of Suspense, number 88, featuring Iron Man Captain America. Once again, I read this issue over a month ago and took notes on it over a month ago, but I will try my best. We have on the cover a sort of delightful surprise. We get a Gil Kane cover, and indeed, Gil Kane will be taking over the Captain America book on the inside. Kane is a great penciler, inker, and co-plotter. He's not as good as Kirby. I will still continue to miss Kirby on this book, but I will like Kane better than who did the last issue? Whoever did the previous issue. I'm going to like Kane better than, and I'm happy to have Kane on this book. So we have on the cover Captain America fighting Sword. Now, see, I make this mistake before. Power Man and Swordsman, not Swordman and Powers Man. He is fighting them both on the cover. And it says there will be a madly menacing mystery villain. So as we've learned in this podcast already, if you're reading X-Men and there is a mystery villain, it always turns out to be a Magneto. If you are reading Captain America and there is a mystery villain, and certainly my son knows this from the Captain America comics, I've read them from both the 60s and 80s, like, well, Jack, here's a mystery villain in Captain America, guess who it is? And it's always Red Skull. But first, let's go ahead and jump in and do Iron Man. So this is exactly what I was talking about on page 1 of Iron Man, where Pepper's shoes, they look like horse hooves.
Oh, yeah, they do. Yeah, you're right. And she looks exactly like Karen, just with a red wig.
I think this is the love child of Pepper and Gorgon, who now had a love child with hooves on. So then, when last we saw Iron Man and Pepper Potts were trapped below the earth fighting the Mole Man, and indeed, that is all that's going to happen in this issue, is they're fighting the Mole Man, and I'm going to just breeze through this issue. I'm going to go through it very quickly. Brought to you by those wildly acclaimed Wizards of Way Out Wonderment, Stanley and Gene Cohen, being credited on the same line, inked by fearless Frank Giacoya, lettered by adorable Artie Simek. Okay, Frantic One, now you're on your own. They've been doing this for a while, and we haven't been commenting on it. They've been calling the audience Frantic One. That's odd. Why would you want to refer to your audience as frantic? I don't know. Anyway, getting back to the splash page, Iron Man has quite a gluteus maximus going on here on the splash page. It's quite an armored butt he's got there.
It looks like he only does the left side on leg day.
Yes, he's got some mad-ass junk in his trunk. So then we begin.
But only on one side. On one side.
So then Iron Man is fighting various moloids, which is always kind of fun. I like watching people fight moloids. Mole Man's got some sort of sci-fi gun to shoot at him. We could then cut to, on the surface, the army is discussing what's going on underground. And I really love, the only thing I love about this story is the picture of the army generals underlit by seemingly this, lit up table on page 6 is really gorgeous. I really love it. It makes the whole issue worthwhile.
I'm guessing that had to be some sort of photo reference. I mean, it looks like some sort of photo reference where maybe he didn't just redrew the face of the general in the middle who's speaking or something like that.
Yeah, it's really gorgeous. But the rest of the issue is just a waste. Mole Man attacks him with an iron dragon at one point with breathing fire. And then finally, at the end, they manage to escape. He does a better job with Karen's shoes on the final page. And he is racing back to the surface while he leaves the Mole Man's chamber disintegrating. And he says, "It's over, Pepper. The nightmare has ended. The threat of the Mole Man is finished forever." Not something I believe. Next issue, The Return of the Mysterious Melter. I have very little to say about this issue. Do you have anything to say?
Just some of the interaction between Iron Man and Pepper is, the whole thing like, oh, I can't let her know how much I care about her. I must treat her cold and indifferent and kind of mean. I'm like, okay, I guess, I don't really see why that is, but okay, sure, why not? And then at the end, well, the sort of the main big suspenseful plot point in this issue is, oh no, the army might send down some sort of force to rescue me and the factory, but they'll be absolutely obliterated, so I must tell the army not to send anything down, and it'll run down my batteries, but I must do this. And it just seems like a weird point of suspense. You know what I mean? It seems very low stakes to me. I mean, they try to make it high stakes, but it's, it has the form of something that is very low stakes. Yeah, and at the end, you're like, oh yeah, the Mole Man is, crushed beneath all this stuff. He's specifically nuked. I mean, this is an atomic drill of some sort. And then when he starts trying to manipulate it, he says, the Geiger counter, it's going mad. A chain reaction is building up. Something went wrong. And, Iron Man flies out of there real quick as there's then a massive explosion behind him. That's a nuclear explosion.
You're right.
But, sure, why not? Nuclear explosions, they happen all the time in this world. That's fine.
That's true. As I say at the end, very simplistic issue, no twist, sloppy art. Love that one panel. Yeah, like I do miss the early days of Marvel Comics where there would be like a twist in every story, like, oh ho ho, but, ironically, but it's like, no, there's utterly irony-free storytelling at this in too many books at this point.
Two little observations I had. One, this is where Iron Man once again offers to sell out everybody in order to save his own skin, which was his actual literal origin story, and he has continued to do over and over. And the people around him still haven't figured out that this is just one of his go-to strategies. They all seem to be horrified that he's doing this. And then the other thing is, it always bugs me that the Mole Man is so abusive to the Moloids. I mean, I know the Moloids are supposed to like have basically no feelings or emotions. They're like some really, primitive form of life, but you don't have to say, "Good work, you brainless bumblers." It's you're just saying they did good work. Why? Anyway, there's always like, oh, that's right, Mole Man is just a dick. All right, so go on.
Okay, moving on to the back half of the book, Captain America, Living Legend of World War II, If Bucky Lives.
He doesn't.
Inscribed, illustrated, and immortalized by Stan the Manly and Gil Sugarlips Kane, lettered by Swing and Sammy Rosen. So is this the first time they've teased us that Bucky might actually be alive? It is not the last. We are about to have a good 30 years of comics of teasing that Bucky might actually be alive, but he's not until finally he is, when they do the Winter Soldier storyline in the early aughts. But that is still a long way away. It is still just a tease at this point.
Before that, there was the phrase when people would talk about a character in comics being dead, is this character dead? Or are they Bucky dead? Meaning that Bucky was the character that just would not come back ever, and most other characters would. But that phrase no longer holds, nor would the other alternate phrase that would have worked, Gwen Stacy dead. Right?
Yeah.
Now, she's come back in various forms. The only one that would work at this point is Ben Parker.
Yes, Uncle Ben dead.
Yes. All right, go on.
Let's hope they never bring him back. All right, so then we've got one of my pet peeves here on page 1, where you have a cube with screens on every side, and when we look at the two sides of the cube, then we're looking at different sides of Bucky's face, because each one is drawn as if he is actually inside the cube instead of as if a camera is pointed directly at him. Always pet peeve of mine. Various screens showing Bucky calling for help. Captain America is, of course, immediately going to go rescue him. I really like Gil Kane's sci-fi ships. He gets in a cool-looking Gil Kane sci-fi ship on page 2. Of course, later Gil Kane would do a daily comic strip called Starhawks, which had a lot of fun sci-fi ships in it.
I was going to mention that same fact when you were talking about his sci-fi ships.
So then he goes to an island sci-fi headquarters. Meanwhile, we also have Swordsman and Power Man going to the same one, being taken there by some sort of bubble for some reason. And of course, and then they're being spoken to by someone speaking through a speaker. Now, when I would read these comics to my son, I'd always be like, oh, there's some mystery villain who's behind everything going on in Captain America. What voice should I give him? And I'm like, I'm just going to give him the Red Skull voice. I'm not going to lie to my son. I'm not going to tell my son it's not Red Skull. I want my son to be a smart young man. I want him to always be able to figure these things out. So I would just go ahead and read this with my standard Red Skull voice, which is to say, I would say, I bid you welcome. My true identity is of no concern to you, but it served me well, and you shall be rewarded beyond your wildest dreams.
That seems like a really sort of almost falsetto voice for him. Is that
Yes.
What was that choice about?
Hey man, I spent a lot of time at the Stanislavski School, and I put a lot of thought into my choices. So then, Anyway, Captain America ends up fighting Swordsman and Power Man. It goes for most of the issue. We don't need to go into great detail. Meanwhile, we find out that while they're doing this, has this already happened, or are they saying this is going to happen? At the end, it shows a bubble swallowing up part of Manhattan and pulling it off into the sky. And I'm like, wait, has this already happened, or is this something that could happen?
No.
I think they're saying this is something that could happen with his ability to make bubbles fly around. So then Captain America at the end sees the mystery villain. It's like, you? And it's like, oh, Captain America, why on earth would you be surprised? Anyway, that is the end of the issue. We will not find out until next issue. It is, spoiler alert, the Red Skull.
So I do have to say, I'm not as smart as your son. I was actually thinking it was going to be either Baron Zemo's son or Baron Strucker, who we know has just come back in Nick Fury Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., but Captain America hasn't seen him yet. So that was actually my thought, but apparently I'm just not as bright as Jack, which shouldn't be a surprise to me at all.
Yeah, I guess when you just visited, you didn't get a chance to play chess against Jack. If you had any illusions about you being as bright as Jack, if you had played him in chess, those would have been quickly dispelled. Yes, so anyway, no, that's it. That's all my thoughts on this issue. Do you have anything to add?
Just little things about like Captain America can't remember that the swordsman can, his sword isn't just a sword, that it's also some kind of a energy weapon of some sort. And he's like, oh no, I totally forgot that. It's like, why? Why would you forget that? That doesn't make any sense. And Swordsman at one point saying to Power Man, the Power Man says, below us, it isn't possible. Swordsman says, once you realize all things are possible, my friend, you will never be shocked again. I'm like, that's a weird thing to say.
Yes. He's a little philosophical.
I guess so. It's a little unclear here whether Power Man and Swordsman have been kidnapped or hired, or kidnapped and then hired. It's just all a little bit vague. It's got some things to recommend it, but there are definitely some parts that I'm not a big fan of.
No, I like Gil Kane's fight scenes. This is basically one fight scene between Captain America, Swordsman, and Power Man, and I think it's a lot of fun. I enjoy reading it. I think, especially it's been so interesting having Kane ink himself for all these early Marvel issues he's been doing, and I love it. I think the art's gorgeous in this issue, so I'm a fan of this issue.
Yeah, the fight scene stuff is good, but it's like all the stuff about what the plan is and the time frame of what's happening when and stuff like that. That all is what bugs me. So, but yeah, the fight scenes are gorgeous.
Yeah, and I like the idea of teasing that Bucky is coming back, and I like having the Red Skull back. I'm a fan. But anyway, let's move on to our final book of the month, which is Thor.
Good. We're actually ending on a high note this time, which is nice. All right, the cover. The only words are the title down at the very bottom, to die like a god, and we see Thor and Sif in the foreground. Actually, it looks like Sif is holding another Mjolnir, which there is a duplicate Mjolnir in this issue, but I don't think Sif ever holds it. I just now noticed that.
Yeah, it's weird.
A little bit weird. And then we see Oracle in the background is this giant sci-fi robot alien looking thing behind a big wall of flame. I like this cover a lot. Inside, though, we talked about in Tales to Astonish that Bruce Banner decided that the most heroic thing that he could think of to do would be to end his own life. So here we have the second time in this same month when a hero decides the most heroic thing he could do would be to end his own life for slightly different reasons. But first of all, the credits: a peerless pictorial pageant painstakingly produced with perfectly pardonable pride by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, inked with the prowess of Vince Colletta, lettered with the pen points of Sam Rosen.
Yes.
So Thor has lost Mjolnir. And, of course, when he does not have Mjolnir, that means that he is going to revert to being Don Blake very shortly.
I should say that they pretend they're proud of Vince Colletta. It says, inked with the prowess of Vince Colletta. However, I had saved, and since it has been a month, I have lost. We know that they're not actually proud of Vince Coletta's inking, because you can find on the internet page 2 in its original art version, and we see that somebody wrote in the margins, Colletta really messed this up.
Really? Yeah. I'm not familiar with that. Wow. Okay. Well, one way or the other. So Thor is about to revert to his Don Blake self while Asgard is on the brink of being conquered by the trolls. And he is just desperate to get back and try to help defend Asgard. But he can't get back there without his hammer, and he's about to turn back into Don Blake. So he figures, you know what I'll do? I'll jump down onto the subway tracks and commit suicide by subway as soon as I turn back to Don Blake, and then hopefully I will then appear in Valhalla, at which point I can then help the fight. And I'm like, that's dark. And also, yes. Isn't Valhalla for people who fall in battle? Would this count to be have a battle with the subway? It doesn't make any sense. And Sif is like, I'm a god too. I have power to go ahead and take us where we need to go. And once you're off Earth, your Don Blake curse is only active when you're on Earth. He's like, oh, that's right, I forgot. Okay, cool. So,
Yeah, Sif's teleportation power is something that will come and go. But occasionally she will have teleportation power when it's convenient.
So we just get more details about, Asgard about to fall, and Odin is about to collapse, but he refuses to take a break. We see some fantastic troll technology, like, vehicles and guns and all sorts of stuff that just are just fantastic Kirby madness. Well, I say troll technology. It's actually technology from this being from another universe called Oracle, whom we will see in a little bit. And we see that Odin has some kind of scepter that has special powers. They're able to drain all the powers out of it. And at that point, he's just like, all right, well, I guess this is trash now. Let's just go into battle with no weapon because Odin is a massive badass. Now, we have what I would consider a no prize moment here on page 8. Do you know what I'm talking about?
You mean just that Ullek can pick up the hammer?
Yes.
Yeah.
Ullek is holding the hammer. Now, other people will point out, oh, no, but we just saw they were making a duplicate of the hammer. So the duplicate wouldn't have all the magical abilities. And I'm like, yeah, but he's holding up the original and the duplicate to compare them.
Nope. Ullek is worthy. He's turns out to be a really great dude, just like Captain America at the end of Endgame.
Yes. So Thor shows up and is able to summon Mjolnir back to him, at which point he and Ullek get into just an epic hand-to-hand, or hammer-to-hammer in this case, battle. Page 9, panel 3. I mean, come on.
Yes. It's amazing.
Thor and Ullek are both smashing their two Mjolnirs into each other, just with such epic power.
Look at that panel. That panel inked entirely with brush, and it's got 2 elbows in it, and neither is bad. This is a perfectly inked panel.
Yeah.
I would not change anything about the inking on page 9, panel 3, even the elbows. I wouldn't change anything. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, it really is quite good. Once again, Colletta can be good when he cares, and he's been pretty good lately. I think that he's sort of slipped again here.
Page 1, pretty bad. Page 1, I don't like the arms, and I don't like any of the 4 eyes. Yeah. He's still got weaker spots, but some of it shockingly good. I gotta say, even the panel that they specifically said Colletta ruined, the final panel on page 2, I kind of like that panel. It's got lots of Kirby crackle in it, and I kind of like what Coletta's doing with sort of hatching to show that they're teleporting. So I disagree with the comment. Unfortunately, I can't find the panel I clipped from the internet where someone had complained about the panel in the border, but I can't find it.
Yeah, no, if that's the panel they're talking about, then yeah, I also have to disagree. I think that's a fantastic panel. Now, the panel before that, her eyeballs are rather upsetting.
Yes.
But no, what I'm saying is in recent issues, we have commented that Colletta has been surprisingly good. And so I think this issue, he kind of slips a little bit. From where he's been lately. So Sif, who, by the way, has a bit of a 5-head in this issue, which
yes.
I just kept on noticing it again and again. It's like, it's one of those things where she did her bangs herself, and then it's just like, oh, no, you're stuck with those for a while, aren't you?
Yes.
It's like, oh, and you have that Elizabethan hairline. Oh, yeah. Nice bangs.
I just noticed this in my notes. Like the Colletta inking on Odin scenes, but Sif has too much forehead on page 7. So mine's think alike.
Yes. And yours does too. Let's see. So there's, more fantastic battle stuff going on. The trolls are about to win when Thor ends up breaking through into the cavern where Oracle is held imprisoned by the trolls. And I think in the previous issue, we saw Oracle in the previous issue and saw that he was being held captive and being forced to create all of this otherworldly, or actually other universe technology for the trolls they've been able to use to nearly defeat Asgard here. So Thor comes in, Ullek follows him, and Ullek is about to kill Oracle. He is jealous of the favor that Oracle is now being held in by the Troll King. He's like, I was the greatest warrior and most beloved of the king for what I could do militarily, and now Oracle has taken that place, and I do not like it, so I'm now going to destroy Oracle, even though it might mean the endangerment of our invasion. I just can't have him taking credit for that. And so, yeah, he's going to turn on the flames higher. So apparently Oracle is being held in place by flame, which apparently I guess is something that doesn't exist in his universe. So he has a weakness to it.
I thought it was very well set up that they're like, oh, I will use these special controls to make things even worse for Oracle. And then
Yes.
Thor is like, oh, now that you show me where the controls are and what they do, I can use them to save Oracle. And I thought that was clever plotting to set up why Thor would know how to fix the problem.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, that's the control? Cool. I'm just going to knock out Ulik and turn the flames off, just as long as I can get Oracle to agree that he will leave as soon as he can. And Oracle's like, that is exactly what I want to do. I'm going to get out of here, and I do not want to help those trolls anymore. So he disappears, and suddenly all the trolls' technology immediately stops working, at which point they are routed out of Asgard. Well, I say all their weapons immediately stop working. Apparently their vehicles can still retreat.
Yeah.
But, okay, sure, fine. Odin is then saying, oh, well, it's glorious that we won this battle, but I'm still sad that I couldn't share this with my son. Why didn't my most favored son show up to help defend Asgard? And then he sees Thor coming through the portal that the trolls were leaving through, looks almost like a boom tube, actually, and comes back and he's like, no, I'm the one who actually won the day, and Odin is very happy. And that is the end of this story before we get on to Tales of Asgard.
A rare wrap up in our massive Shaggy Dog story that is Thor, where things have wrapped up satisfactorily for once, although the back half of the book will continue to be a big rambling story.
Okay, so are we ready to move on to Tales of Asgard, home of the mighty Norse gods?
Yes.
So the secret of the Mystic Mountain. Previously on Tales of Asgard, Thor and the Warriors 3 had found the stronghold of this ascetic, mystic, monk, wise man, whatnot, who was able to give them information about where to find the murderous, merciless Mogul. And again, Mogul is a vaguely pan-Asian character in a vaguely pan-Asian world. That is where Hogun came from. So once again, to review, anyone who was mad about Hogun being cast as Asian in the Thor movie, here, this is actually very consistent with canon.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's Arabic culture and South Asian culture and Southeast Asian culture and all sorts of stuff. So it's kind of a big mishmash, but it is what it is. Mogul gets word that the strangers are approaching, Thor and the Warriors 3. Page 2, panel 2. Do you have a problem with Mogul in that panel?
No, I don't.
Okay, this is the second time I have seen this precise issue that gave me a problem and did not give you a problem. His head is about 3 or 4 inches too far to our left.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I hadn't noticed that. But, yeah. Oh, yeah. Kind of think of it, yeah.
Now that you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. I think that he's supposedly supposed to be kind of probably turned a little bit more than he actually was drawn, and so then that's supposed to be his chest protruding and his head is sort of back. But the fact that his body is drawn face on, just absolutely flat on, doesn't make that work. So he calls up a genie, spelled Jinni, but we usually think of it in English as a Genie, but it's all the same thing. It's all from Arabic pre-Islamic folklore and looks very much like what we think of as a genie. So Mogul is summoning the genie to help. Meanwhile, Thor and the Warriors 3 are looking for this mystic mountain that they were told to look for. Thor somehow figures out, and they don't really say how he figures this out, which I find a little disappointing, that this is some kind of reverse mountain, some kind of inverted mountain that goes down into the wasteland plains here. And he's able to unearth this, and there's this giant crystal like stalactite reaching down into the earth, in which this mystical city is encased like a city in a bottle, which is a nice visual, but I really wish they had explained a little bit more how they had gotten here. So at the end, Hogan is impatient to go and start this battle, and then the genie shows up for a fight, and we will get to that next issue. Or I guess they keep on referring to him as the Genie Devil. Which seems a little, it's like, no, we get it, dude. We know what a genie is. You don't need to add that value judgment on there. But another fun little chapter in our current adventure. What are your thoughts?
I think it's great. I think it's just fantastic. Obviously, Kirby loves his cutaways, his cutaway views, and here we have, they think they're standing on abandoned desert, and then they realize that there's a whole city underneath them, and we get how that would look from the side if you could look at it from the side, and it is truly awesome, and it is wonderful.
Yeah. So that, I guess, is it for this month. Do you have any wrap-up thoughts on this month of Marvel Comics?
I think this is a good month of Marvel Comics. You would think that Heidi would have taken the best issues and left us with scraps, but she certainly did not. She left us with a lot of great issues that I don't know why she didn't take, but she wasn't just choosing the best. She was choosing the ones she wanted to have interesting things to say about, which is a sign that she is a great journalist, as indeed she is. It is a shame we couldn't get her for all 9 books, but I'm very glad we had her for the 4 books we did, and I'm glad we were able to get a good discussion out of the 5 books that were left.
Yeah, and like I said, we had 2 pretty great books in this episode. 3 that were, from acceptable to terrible. But as we've said so many times, that's kind of the whole conceit of this entire podcast, is taking the good with the bad and seeing how we got here.
Yeah.
So hopefully it won't be quite as long this time between when you hear this episode and the next one. Granted, since it is right during the holidays, there is the possibility it might still not quite be on schedule, but we're hoping to get back there. And one thing that I have been working on and sort of not really following through on is possibly setting up a Patreon, not necessarily with any actual extra content, because we're kind of busy doing the content that we're doing, but just one of those things where it's like, hey man, if you appreciate the 100+ hours of entertainment that you've been able to get through this podcast, and you want to just go ahead and pitch in for the money that we spend on hosting and any of the time that we spend, that would be great. But no real pressure, but I'll see if I can get that up and running before this episode comes out.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay, cool. All right. Thanks, everybody. Stay safe out there, and try to take care of your mental health the best you can. And we will be back here to help distract you from the real world again soon.
Yeah. And if you can't listen to MSNBC or Pod Save America anymore, or any of those other podcasts that you used to listen to, then listen to this one instead. Which is what I've been doing, man. I just have been loving re-listening to the 100 episodes of this podcast, and loving how it is, it is a refuge from politics, how we don't talk about politics. And we're going to keep doing that. I felt like I sort of had to give a little statement at the beginning, at the top of this episode, but, we're not going to, and unfortunately next month we have a very Trump-esque villain in Submariner, so we're going to have to talk about that. But, we're not going to turn this into a political podcast, folks. And I feel like we were able to have a good day today. I'm not as chucklehead guy as I used to be, but I'm trying my best.
Yeah, and it's good to have these sorts of things where we can get back into our old rhythm and laugh about some things here. So
yeah.
All right. Well, yeah. Once again, thank you, everybody. Take care and stay safe out there.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for listening to Marvel Reread Club. Please subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. Your reviews and ratings are a great help and always appreciated. We love hearing from you. Go to marvelrereadclub.com to find notes and join the discussion about this episode. We're also on Facebook and Instagram. See you next time.